Okay, go ahead. All right, welcome everyone to the November 4th meeting of the Messinic Regional School Board. Before we begin, I'd like to shout out a quick welcome to Michelle Third, who's joining us tonight for the first time as our Director of Technology. Welcome aboard. Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. All right, call this meeting to order. Are there any agenda adjustments, Superintendent?
I have a few. Under reports of the board, a student representative, he had special practice tonight because they're in the championships, so he could not attend tonight. I'm also requesting that under new business, we bring the draft budget presentations. We put that first so the ABC can participate. And we are scratching under new business the co-curricular committee recommendations. We'll hold off on that.
Everybody have that?
Mhm.
Okay, well, also let me state now that we will be going into a non-public session this evening. Date and time of the next meeting is November 18th. Let's start with the approval of the minutes of October 21st, 2024.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
Okay. Tim makes a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
I'll second that motion.
Ellen seconds. Any further discussion, folks? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, seeing none, we approve unanimously. One abstention. Actually, I'm not, well, okay, I'll allow that. Public comments and communication, I assume everybody's out there from the ABC, Ed, and other places that I know. Okay. Board chair remarks. We've got a heavy night in front of us. I've gone through most of the presentations of the budget with most of the operating staff. I will make a comment that I was somewhat disappointed that our middle school field hockey team had to play on turf where they haven't really practiced or played all year long. I'm hoping that they go back to a previous format, which had teams playing on grass because that's what most of the fields are. But kudos to them all. All the teams have done fantastically, and obviously our student rep is still playing. Dr. Pogrzewski.
So tonight, we have our draft one of the budget. This was I would like to think it was a very authentic experience for everyone who participated. We tried to make it very transparent. We did not have meetings prior. We met as a group, talked about what our needs were, and then as again, board members and budget committee members were able to ask questions along with myself, Rachel, and Melissa, for the different budgets. So our plan tonight was to do draft one highlights, just discuss these are the big things that are in our budget, and then to go through and have each budget manager do a quick 5-minute highlight of their individual budget. We're encouraging feedback because this is how we grow. This is how we make changes. This is what we're here for. This is draft one. So we're looking again, draft two will be in 2 weeks. So we're looking for feedback tonight, questions if you have any. What I've learned in this process is many of the questions I had in asking them, I got the answer. I then was able to understand what exactly we were talking about. So please don't hesitate to ask questions if you have them, because I think the explanations that the experts in front of you have are extremely important. So without further ado, Rachel Anderson, Business Administrator.
Welcome, everyone. Just to go through what the board members and the ABC committee members have in their packets. That first page is the highlights, which is self-explanatory. We'll go over those in a second. And then a recap of all the different like function codes, by category. In the thicker packet is the full proposed draft 1 of the budget. And then you'll have individual departments' budgets behind that you can follow along with or study further. We figured it might be easier to separate those out if someone had a special interest in any of those, departments. So on to the highlights or the lowlights, depending on your perspective, I suppose. So we are proposing a couple additions. First is to change the Highbridge Hill librarian from a 0.5 to a 1.0, which means it would turn into a full-time position. Also, the elementary school is looking to add 2 kindergarten paras. Last year, we had to cut 2 of them due to the default budget, so they're asking for those back again. Also at Highbridge Hill, we're looking to add a 0.8 reading and writing specialist teacher to respond to the CSI designation that's at that school. We're also looking to add summer hours for our social worker. In addition, there's some salary adjustments and COLAs within this budget. By and large, most people will be receiving or proposed to receive a 3% COLA with 5% COLAs for our school level administrative assistants and our custodians, because we felt like those were the pay ranges that needed the most work. They were way below market. We're also looking to add a registered behavior technician to respond to some student needs we're seeing. And also we're adding 2 special education case managers, and we're moving them from the grant. So they're currently paid through the federal grant, and we're moving them into the general fund. We're proposing to eliminate the lunch monitor position at the high school. And as of now, we are anticipating an 8% increase in health insurance. I won't know the exact rates until probably Wednesday at the earliest, but that is an estimate, and I think that's a low estimate, to be honest, after hearing from school care. Dental insurance, we're anticipating a 5% increase. Long-term disability life, anticipating a 10% increase in premiums. We also have a teacher that's having a lane change, meaning they're going from a bachelor's lane to a master's lane in their pay scale. We have confirmed that workers' compensation insurance rates are going up 10%. Also, unemployment insurance through the state is going up 8.9%. Property and liability insurance is going up 9%. That's confirmed. We're also looking to add a new capital reserve account for our tech department to kind of anticipate and pay for those larger purchases that come along every few years. The Messinic Regional High School Library is looking to add some furniture or replace some furniture. And one of the math classrooms is also looking to replace the tables. We anticipate a significant increase in student interest in our CTE programming, so that budget line has increased. And that will be somewhat offset by some state aid, which wouldn't be reflected in this budget document, but in the revenues, that will offset a little bit. We also have some general increases in special education due to some significant student needs, and we're seeing an influx of new special ed students for families that are moving into our towns. So we're anticipating needing more resources there. Also in our food service program, we estimate that there'll be a loss of roughly $60,000 next year in the program. So we have to budget for that appropriately. The facilities department is looking to get a robotic field line painter to help save on man hours. And then the facilities also has a couple projects planned: carpet replacement at Boynton and exterior concrete work at Boynton. Our bus transportation, we are in a 5-year contract with our bus company, which the price escalates every year. So that's the confirmed increase. Also, our special education is going to be increasing as well in our busing. The good news is that our bond interest is going down. And then also bus transportation for athletics is going up. We plan on replacing Chromebooks for the incoming 3rd and 8th graders and replacing 4 staff laptops as those are aging out. We are also lucky enough to be purchasing, or we have purchased a second van to use at the high school and anticipate purchasing a third one using grant monies. So we need to budget more for the driver, gas, and maintenance of that. And that is the recap.
So many of these items are going to be discussed in the individual budget. So if you have questions, can you hold them until budget managers explain the next part? So
Rachel, not a question, but I think you said that the UC was up 8.9, it's down, which you have. perfect
Oh, I'm
knowledge.
sorry, I misspoke. Thank you for clarifying.
okay, can we move to Craig?
Mhm.
Right, Craig?
Thank you. Try to highlight just a few things in my budget. There are some, small changes here and there, but I'll hit the big ones for you. We'll try. First positive note, in the 622 lines of my budget, the electricity. We did sign back up for a program we used to be on years ago, so we are getting a good rate, and we're looking at about $74,000 in anticipated savings from where we were at. So that is helpful to my budget. My 430 lines, which are repair and maintenance, increases there. As Rachel said, quick background of the money that's allocated in there every year, about 2/3 of that goes to what I call the have-tos, all the state inspections and everything that we're required to do by law and RSA and all those things. That takes up about 2/3 of my actual repair budget, which leaves minimal dollars to do any projects and things that pop up. And our buildings are getting to that age where things pop up more and more every year. So I did add some dollars in there. Like Rachel had said, looking to do a couple of projects where we've got a couple of safety issues with carpets that need replacing at Boynton. They're starting to become trip hazards. Same thing with the concrete out front. It's starting to deteriorate and it really should be taken care of. I want to roll in my 424 is lawn and grounds. Part of that, which isn't, you won't find on my budget, is that I have a part-time grounds maintenance worker. And I am requesting to move him to a full-time employee. My goal is efficiency. Quite honestly, with our grounds, we have one guy full-time and we have a lot of grounds, a lot of ground for them to cover. Again, small budget. That's a $24,000 budget for 3 buildings. Over half of that goes to turf care that keeps our athletic fields green, as we struggle to do. We ice melt, field paint, which leaves realistically about $5,000 for anything else grounds related. That's repairs, that's bark mulch, plantings, projects, any work on athletic fields, which are, if any of you have been out there, baseball, softball, are in need of some infield work. There's a lot of work that could be done. So I'm hoping to get a full-time employee from the part-time, which would help with that. The other part that she did mention, which is the elephant in my room, the robotic field painter. Again, looking forward for the efficiency of all of this. It takes away so much time. We tested it last year on field hockey, just a quick one. When we had initial setup of a field hockey field, it takes about 7 hours, 5 gallons of paint. That's finding the pins, that's lining, pulling out string to line. When we used the robotic field painter, it took about a half a gallon of paint and 23 minutes to paint the entire field from the get-go. While that could be painting our fields, our guys could be out mowing lawns, weed whacking. There's so much stuff for them to do out there. And I'm hoping that having 2 guys full-time and the possibility of that would allow us to really get a lot of things accomplished around our grounds. So, happy to take any questions in regards to anything in the budget.
Questions on board, Michelle?
This is a question that I will probably be asking everybody about their budget, but of the things that you did not include in your budget, what would be the most important item if you could add that in?
Mine's a tough one to lock down on one item. I feel like my biggest struggle in the last 2 years, realistically, is just having the money there for when things are breaking down. You know, even our new school was built in 2011. You know, that's about, we're pushing 14 years, and a lot of HVAC systems, their life expectancy is 15 years. So to try and to have money to feel safe with the things starting to break down, or be a little more proactive about replacing things before they do, I would probably lean towards that. Yeah.
And how much money would that be in order to feel safe?
Oof. I don't know that I have a specific dollar amount, but I would say, you know, each event that's been happening, it runs us anywhere from $3,000 to $10,000. I mean, you know, perfect world, another $30,000 at every school would probably make me sleep a little better.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Further questions from the board? Tom?
Yeah, the Boynton coaches, will they be able to use the field painting? Because they're their own lines down to town field when they use the field down there.
No, we paint the fields.
Okay.
The town takes care of the initial painting of the fields when they set them up. But we paint fields every game day for middle school teams. But yeah, we would also use it for that. Yeah, absolutely.
Any other questions? I'm going to run this very informally tonight because I really want the give and take. All right, Craig, thank you.
Thank you.
Move on in whatever order that you would think.
Well, see, I'm going along the bottom of the spreadsheet, but so I'm not going in order of
A cheat
people
sheet.
around
Okay,
the
yeah,
table.
no, that's fine.
So I'm sorry, Chris Saunders, Highbridge Hill, you're up.
All righty. Thank you. So I'm just going to speak to sort of the changes in the budget and then staffing sort of separately, because there were certainly some staffing items that Rachel had mentioned. So some of the changes we have are an increase in our supplies line for art is really the only area that we're looking to increase that. Learned last year that the budget for the art program was about $1,000 to outfit the entire school's art program for the year, and everything they purchase is consumable, not as if she buys it and carries it over year to year. So we're hoping to give her more. We're still not quite up to the level of the other buildings, but the hope is to give her $2,000 to see how that goes this year. It seems like that line hasn't increased for some time, even though costs certainly have. So to help sort of outfit that, again, she provides art supplies and projects for the entire student body. Next up is software. Just to note, we shifted a couple of items in the Highbridge Hill budget. So last year in the software line, we paid for our Acadience benchmarking online data management software in the software line, but all of the materials, et cetera, for Acadience were in a testing and professional services line. So we're moving that over to with the other Acadience stuff. So it all lives in one bucket rather than two different places. And I have two additions for software. One being typing software for the elementary level to try to get kiddos up to speed with typing for a couple of reasons. One, state assessment coming third grade and fourth grade, they're required to type their essays, which if that's a barrier, it certainly holds them back in their performance. And secondly, getting them prepared to go to Boynton, where they'd be doing a lot more digital work at that level. So preparing our students through the time that we have with them. The once a week in computer class is not enough to support typing and make a difference. It's got to be something they can access regularly when they have free time. And the second is a piece of software called Pickup Patrol. It's to assist with dismissal plans for students. The management of that has become a little more difficult in the past few years. Pickup Patrol is a pretty popular program. The bus company actually recommended it. I've used it in another building. It just is a way for establishing students' dismissal plans, Parents can make changes through an app or online. We can run a single page report at the end of the day of all the changes to prevent some of the errors. Occasionally we do have human error where a note gets sent in but doesn't get out of a backpack, and then we have a kiddo that's on a bus that's supposed to be a pickup, et cetera. So just trying to rectify some of those issues, because right now we manage emails, phone calls, notes, and inevitably the communication between teacher, office, student, parent sometimes is dropped. So this would help with that piece, and it's not a incredibly high cost. It's about $800 for the license for the whole school. So those are my two software pieces. Then again, the software line, we moved this chunk over to professional services and testing. So it looks like there's an increase of about $6,000 there. That's that online component for Acadians that we had under software last year. But again, we buy booklets and testing supplies out of this other line. It just made sense for it to all live in one space because it all goes to the same company, right? Serves the same purpose. And then on to staffing. We do have some requests. My first request is to increase our librarian from a 0.5 position to a full-time position at Highbridge Hill for a number of reasons. Our library is centrally located in the building. It's a beautiful library. It's used about 50% of the time. Students go in once a week for a short 25-minute lesson. They take books out. But because the teacher's not there 5 days a week, she doesn't have the ability to provide like art, music, PE, and computer do. So it supports in a way of access to the library. Additionally, more lessons to meet some of those standards for the librarians, for school librarians. There's a lot of standards for them to teach, like research skills, library skills, et cetera. Additionally, the CSI designation we have, right, we were identified in the area of literacy, supporting literacy at the earliest of age, getting kids to be in and out of the library all the time as needed, having it be sort of a hub for the building. We're hoping, right, if you start at the youngest age, increasing literacy, love for literacy, that the hope is that over time that benefit will pay off. Next is the 0.8 reading and writing interventionist. This supports a couple of needs for us. Again, our CSI status in the area of reading. We have Title I support. They can only manage so many students because of the number of staff we have. Special ed for students who are identified. And then we have, certainly more students that could benefit from intervention. Additionally, we have some requirements from the state now with a dyslexia screener that we have to provide to all students. Any student that is flagged, we're required to give some sort of intervention and support to. So it's another piece of, it's a requirement that's put on us, but without the addition of a person makes that a challenge, right? So this person can focus solely on those kiddos. Kids can come and go as needed. Supports our CSI status. Additionally, in the CAST report we got, one of the areas that was identified was providing opportunities for intervention for students beyond referral to special ed. So it's just another layer of support we can offer students. And then the last staffing piece is last year with the default budget, we reduced 2 of our kindergarten paraprofessionals. Last year was the first year of full day kindergarten. We saw tremendous growth in that program. I think one of our slides still on the website is their data that pops up on the dashboard of how well they did. I can say that first grade teachers this year, within the first couple of weeks, were calling saying, come and visit the class because the first graders are reading week 1 and 2 of school. It made a huge difference, but this year we have 2 paras in 4 classrooms. So they're bouncing around as they can. It's hard to say now the impact that has because we don't have that data yet to say, look, last year we had this much growth with 4 paras. And where do we stand today just because we're so early in the year? It's when budget falls, right? So we couldn't say if it's had a negative impact yet or not, but I can say the teachers have expressed their feeling and impact of it. Again, these students are least independent in the school. This is their first school experience in a full day, traveling through the building, transitions, lunch, recess, specials, full day of school. And so they need a lot of support. They can't be simply given a task and said, great, go work on this thing and expect that it's going to happen when they're at that school age. So last year we reduced those as a result of having to get to a number for the default budget. It wasn't as if we felt we didn't need them. It was a matter of how do you get to that number, right? And so that was something that we put on the table, but it certainly wasn't a preference. And so putting forward the idea of bringing them back, and that's what I have. And welcome any questions from anyone.
Dr. Borzowski.
I just wanted to clarify for those of you who are not familiar with how the librarian situation currently works. So currently we have one librarian, so it's a full-time librarian that's split between both the middle school and the elementary school. Kevin, Chris, Melissa, and I, we've sat down, we've met about what are the needs if there was a full-time person at the elementary school, how would that impact the middle school? So in talks with Kevin, the way that he envisions the middle school still functioning, it would still be a 0.5. So we're not, I just wanted to be clear that we're not getting rid of the librarian at the middle school. That was confusing.
I would just add one more point to Mr. Saunders regarding the reading and writing teacher. When coupled with our reading specialist, we currently provide dyslexia screening to our students who are in charter schools, in Lionheart Academy specifically. So those two folks have traveled this year. It's created a much more efficient process in being able to support those students, which is required by law.
Okay. Questions from the board? Mitch?
Same question that I asked in
Craig?
terms of what would your number one wish be that you did not include?
It's a bit of a reach, but I think I would probably add an additional classroom teacher to reduce class sizes for our largest grade. They're still reasonable, but could be a little bit lower.
What is your current class size?
It varies wildly, right? So and the recommendations are K to 2. It's a much smaller number that, once you hit third grade, it's higher. Our biggest grade, I'll speak to that because that's where I would go to, is so our second grade this year averages 2021. No one else hits that number of 20 except for second grade, and the projections for next year similarly it's 2021, but it would be lovely if they could be back down in that 17, 16 range like the others are.
Thank you.
Yes.
So just like an optics question. There are three.
Okay, let me interrupt. Any members, I should have said it earlier, because we are on tape and we're live like this, just give your name first so that the people who are,
Sean Waffle, member of the advisory budget committee.
thanks.
You guys, there's 3 lines for copier maintenance. You guys actually have 3 copiers?
I had that same question in my budget meeting, which they can share, is because we have, I'll let Rachel speak to it, but there is a reason that there are 3. I had the same question of why 3.
So one is for, are you referring to the rental of equipment line that says copier?
Well, there's 3 questions. There's actually 3 lines that say copier maintenance. And there's 1 line that says copier lease. And copiers are somewhat like 17% of the operational budget, which isn't a problem if you need however many copiers or whatever, but it just seems like a lot.
I think my understanding was that it's because there is a service plan. They're different. So we have one in the office, has its own plan.
Yeah.
And then we have the grade level teams have one that's a different plan. And so I don't know what the reason is behind that, but there's a different, I think, warranty, program for each one that's paid for.
Yeah, so out of 1,100, 442, it's the copier lease itself. So that's you're going to see that in all the buildings. There's a lease amount, and then you have the copier maintenance. There's 2 different copiers with different maintenance requirements there. And then if you look lower, you have one for the library media repair. That's copier maintenance for the library's copier, and then admin repair maintenance for the admin copier. So we do break it down by machine, and you'll see that in each of the buildings. It's teased out into different categories.
And those are all per contract.
Okay. You really need 3 copiers in the building? Or just,
Well, I think the differentiation piece is that the office one is a color copier. The workroom ones are not. So I think that explains why there's a little bit of a different, coverage for the 2. And the library one, I think, is specifically used for just library materials.
Okay.
But
Cool, thanks.
Tom?
Yes, Tom Paulser. Listen, did you say that, I thought Peterborough was doing out of dyslexia testing.
No, Peterborough is responsible for the students that live in their district. We are responsible for the students that live in ours. We received a technical advisory from the state of New Hampshire, and they're responsible for enforcing their interpretation of the RSA. And so because that came to light last year, we have assigned staff to go over and provide that dyslexia screening to our elementary age students from grades K to 3 now, which is the new requirement as of right now. It will extend to grade 5 going forward.
Yeah, no, I thought that at one time they were doing it for us. No? Okay.
Any other question? Yeah, Ed.
Ed Rogers, Budget Committee, the staffing items you mentioned, are they on this sheet? Or are they on, they must be somewhere else.
The staffing we have on the draft one highlights.
They're Ed, they're on that first sheet, budget highlights.
Yeah.
Top 3.
So that's not, I was assuming all of these total up to the grand total, and each of these must be included somewhere in these. But
So we have our salaries and benefits lines are not part of the lines that the typically that the budget managers control. So that's part of the lines that we control at the SAU. So when if you were to look at the budget that Rachel had presented last week, that was all the salaries and benefits for the whole district. That included, correct? That included these additions.
Right, and it's also in the full budget draft.
okay, that's what I'm
Sorry.
Yeah.
looking for. Yeah.
No, it's a good question, Ed.
And just to clarify on that, if we're going from a 0.5 FTE for the librarian to full-time, it looks like, and so that does include benefits. The 0.5 FTE right now would not include benefits.
That's correct.
Clarify the librarian we have right now that's shared between us is a full-time FTE who is about benefits, retirement. She's just split between buildings. Right. So it's an addition of, in the end, a 0.5 at Boynton.
So we have one FTE now. We'll essentially make the FTE,
So we have a full-time, right now, we have a full-time librarian at the high school.
but split.
At the high school is not split. The high school is full-time. And then we have
No,
another
just-
librarian that's split between the two buildings. So that librarian is considered a full-time position. Looking
Right.
ahead to next year, we're going to be adding 8.5, which means we will have in district 2.5 librarians.
Okay.
As
We have one full between High Bridge and Boynton.
Yes.
2.5, not 2.5s, 2.5.
Thank you.
2.5. 2.5. And so Ed, you're talking about salaries and benefits associated with that halftime position. So at the moment, we don't know how the personnel component of that is going to shake up. So we have to be able to plan for whatever eventuality might be coming down the road. Right? We know we have people who are in the position currently, but everyone has choice, right? About what fits them and what doesn't. So right now we're planning for in contingency, someone who may require benefits ultimately than what we have.
Okay.
Right? That might change as we move down the road, but currently in our CBA, the teacher CBA, they wouldn't, a 0.5 position would not be entitled to benefits.
Okay. All right, that's clear now. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay.
Next, we have Boynton Middle School, Kevin Fondis.
Good evening. My budget has some increases. I recognize that. To go through some of the increases, line 1100-321, it's museum costs. We do virtual and Kearsarge Museum and a virtual Jamestown Museum talks. Those prices have increased. The line that says 1100-430. A lot of this increase is due to the instruments and music program. Last year in May, we had 26 students in the music program. As of this morning, we had 56 students in the band program. Chorus has increased to 20 students. The 1100-550 increase that is due to additional student agendas. Essentially their calendar where they write their homework and things of that nature. And we host each year a popsicle pop into Boynton Day. We are now out of postcards. I need to order more postcards to invite families that are coming into Boynton. Line 591, 1100-591. This is new, and that is an interpreter for our staff meetings. 1100-641 had a large increase. We are adding the benchmark ELA program to 5th and 6th grade. We did remove Safe Sitter program and added that to Widow Island funds. The line 1100-650, a lot of this funding was in the ESSER funding prior. That is no longer happening. It's the most of that is the computer science program, where that was being funded through ESSER funds. The lines 1100-735. This is to repair chairs that have been broken or not repairable anymore. So replace, sorry, chairs that are not repairable anymore. And then some other older equipment through phys ed, things of that nature. Line 580 is a new line. That's for music festivals, transportation. Our new band teacher at Boynton would like to expand the opportunities for our students and bring them to music festivals. That really hasn't happened in the past. Last year we did go to one, was the Southwest, I think it was called the Southwest Music Festival. It's hosted by Amherst. The 810, that's for registration for those festivals. That's new. Athletic fees have increased for competitions, and then part of the Tri-County fees to belong to that association. The 21-22-323 is adding science to our NEWA testing. Currently, we just do math and ELA. We'd like to add science moving forward to get data on those where our students are there. The counseling line, which is 21-22-610, we added a new counselor after the school started. She's looking to expand with our current counselor, additional groups. So there's items in there to support what they do in the counseling program. The line 21-34735, this is the school nurse line for her dues. The other schools have covered it in the past. I didn't realize the other schools were paying for us, and now it's come back to me and our building to pay. The increase in 24-10-240, that is the administration tuition line that's in our contracts. Neglected to add it last year, even though it was part of the contract. I did not use it personally last year. 24-10-580, this is for the second administrator at Boynton, the assistant principal, along with myself, to attend similar conferences. One in particular is called Learning in the Brain. It's a heavy science education based conference that we attend, bring those, what we learn there back to Boynton for our students. 24-810 or 24-10-810. This is increase in administrative dues, New Hampshire Principals Association, things like that. The 24-90-890, that's an increase in interpreter services for our farewell at the end of this, our 8th grade farewell at the end of the school year. And the last increase that we had was 27-24-519, and that's an increase in the bus costs for sports.
Questions, comments from the board? Mitch, same question as
This
he
is
asked.
a surprise.
Oh.
You know, that's,
You've had a few minutes to think.
I have, and there's lots of things I'd love to add. But obviously budgets aren't unlimited. Yeah, that's a tough question to answer. I mean, if you're talking outside, I'd love our amphitheater to be renovated, to be used. I had started looking at that back in 2020 and then the world shut down. So we kind of dropped it from there. Another piece is our sports fields. I'd love to see sports come back to Boynton and not at the town field, but to do that, someone has to remove part of the earth on that, and build a retaining wall. So there's for the outside, that's what those, internally, I mean, Craig and his team have done wonders in Boynton to refresh it and make it look wonderful. So I'm not 100% sure on what I need there. So those are some of the, you know, you were willing to give me unlimited funds. There we go. But those are some of the thoughts moving forward. Those are things I'd like to start planning for in my time here in Messina. Like, I don't plan on leaving. So at least not soon. And then those are things I'd like to start planning for. If what can we do? So, but not added this year.
Sure, follow-up.
One follow-up question. Each of you had expressed, you know, theoretically your number one wish, and if you had more time to think about it, I suppose that perhaps you would make some changes in the answer that you gave me. But in identifying a primary wish that you feel it will not be included in this year's budget, are those items that you realistically think can be in a future budget, near future budget? It's just at this time it's not feasible? Or do you have concerns that that wish will just continue to be a wish?
The sports one is a wish. I think that will continue to be a wish. My amphitheater, not next year, over a 5-year plan, potentially. I think that could happen, but not in the next year or so.
Can I speak to that?
Sure.
I think in a lot of these conversations that we've had, one of the things that have come out is that over the course of time, with trying to be super conservative, some of our needs are actually considered wishes. We are prioritizing our needs.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know, instead of just saying, you know, what do we need versus can we do without this? And I think in talking with the principals and watching how they're budgeting, that was the discussion. It was, well, we need this, but, and I will let Stacy speak to the library chairs, because we went 9 rounds on the library chairs, because library chairs, are they a need or are they a want? Well, they haven't been replaced since 1980 and they're pretty uncomfortable, but do we need, it's that interesting, like,
Mm-hmm.
wish versus need versus, so that's my 2 cents.
Sorry, Steve.
Any other members of the board? Excuse me.
Sorry, Steve, I just wanted to
That's
add
all
a
right.
couple of pieces of information to Kevin's, couple of things that show some increases. You noticed that in his books and prints media and software line, there's a significant increase in both of those lines. We were informed by the Department of Ed this year that the dyslexia requirement and the need for a researched and scientifically based reading curriculum would extend through grade 5. In conversations with Kevin, he and I talked about strategies to ensure that we're providing a really robust literacy curriculum to our students at Boynton Middle School and extending that through grade 6. So you're going to see benchmark materials here. It's going to continue with the current success that we're seeing at Highbridge Hill through the benchmark program through to our grade 6 students. The program doesn't go beyond grade 6, or we would extend beyond grade 6. But in conversations, he and I both thought that that was an important change to get and get in place early. So we give our folks some time to be masters at teaching that curriculum. The other piece I wanted to mention is, just gotta remind myself where it is. There's one more thing I wanted to talk about. Sorry, I lost it. If it comes back to me, I'll mention it, but thank you. Just wanted to mention it.
Just one comment on the amphitheater. Back when we had the amphitheater cleanup day, both the Honor Society and I know a lot of volunteers and teachers worked on that. And one of the ideas that we brought up that day was somehow working with a community project. You know, we have a lot of expertise in construction, whatever. There are issues on the tiers, you know, hold back so that people couldn't fall off the walls. It's a magnificent space. It is used mostly for photographs, and there has been some graduation exercises held out at the top. But if you haven't seen it, it is a magnificent space. And I think over time, if we involve the community and we can get, you know, donations of construction and that sort of thing, we could truly turn it into the gem it was meant to be. Dr. Kozf-eoj?
No, I was just going to say that Kevin has used it in a variety of spaces. It was critical during COVID, having
Yeah.
our breaks out there. But there are, if any of you are familiar with it, along the ledges, a lot of the stonework, there's problems with it.
It's degrading. Yeah.
I remembered what I was gonna.
Okay, Tommy, almost, Tom.
NWEA, Kevin indicated there was an increase there to add science. So NWEA is our district level assessment system. It is what we use from K through grade 10 to assess our students in literacy and math. The state requires through the New Hampshire SAS process that students are tested in grades 5, 8, and 11 for science. We have not used NWEA for that, but yet they provide a resource. So Kevin, again, in conversations, he and I were talking about and the opportunity NWEA would provide us to be able to intervene on the skills. Across the state, we're seeing proficiency scores that are below 50%. Our proficiency scores are around 38%-ish. So a place that we need to be paying attention and doing some work. That's part of that increase in that line.
Thank you, Melissa. Tom?
Yes, Tom Falder. What, I don't do this, Kevin, Melissa, why is Eureka Math still costing so much money? And I don't see any of those costs at the hybrid school, and how successful is the program?
So Eureka Math, there are profs at Hybrid Hill for Eureka Math. You'll see that in their books and prints media line. That is the consumable product. Eureka Math provides students with workbooks every year. That's what you're seeing in that line over and over, the replacement of those books for students. The success of the program, we're seeing some growth in our students' ability to problem solve over time. We're seeing some growth in their proficiency scores on the state assessment. Overall, we are moving kids down a trajectory for readiness for algebra. We will still continue to work on that. We are not there yet, but Eureka is helping us to get there.
Okay.
Next is Messinic Regional High School, Stacy Mahakian.
Thank you. So I'll highlight some of my big increases and big decreases. They have the sheet, right? The same one that I have?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So going down to the supply area, you'll see an increase of $39.50. That is representative of our art supplies and some science consumables that we are looking to purchase. And you'll see in the textbooks, we're down by $4,900. I believe that will also decrease because we are looking to purchase those health books this year, as well as the marketing books this year. In the new equipment line, that's where you see what Rachel mentioned is We are looking for some calculators. Oh, that's the next line, math tables, but those are new equipment for science, dissecting trays, calculators. Our physical ed teacher is new this year. He wants to introduce pickleball, so that's representative. Our ELA teacher is doing drama and does a lot of her teaching inside the auditorium, so we're looking for rolling whiteboard easels there. And we have a new music teacher as well that is hopefully enhancing our program so much that we can welcome all those kiddos from Boynton, which will be wonderful, and increasing those music. We have lots of new instruments that have come, and we are repairing many as well. And if you go down to the next line, the replacement of equipment, we have math tables in a certain classroom where a lot of the tables are mismatched, as well as in disrepair and bowing. Take up a great deal of space. So our math teacher is requesting math tables that are more conducive to the learning environment there. Let's see, and then also the library tables. We are requesting in the library. Those tables have been there, I think, actually like 1970, but and they are in great shape. They are stood the test of time, but if you ever walk by our library, our kids are not using them. So they are more interested in the flexible seating options that we have there. So our librarian's looking to offer more flexible seating options there. Going down to our voc ed, you see a significant increase there of $16,000. We've seen a great increase, especially just between last year and this year. Last year we had about 12 students go to CTE. This year we have almost 32. So that is representative of seeing that trajectory keep going up. We've seen NHIA has increased their costs for officials and fees the first time in several years. So you'll see those increases under athletics. We are looking to purchase field hockey goals next year. So you see an increase there under equipment. The next one is also to look at collaborative seating area for the library. It's a $2,700 increase there for booths in the library, which Mr. Franz is very much vying for. And then you'll see a decrease in the admin contract for tuition. It was budgeted last year at $8,000. We're aligning with the other schools to make sure that we are on par with that. So that was just an error in previous years. And then you go down to the transportation. Transportation is also increased for athletics. So that's a $6,500 increase. And last year, the budget for our field trip transportation for guidance field trips, music field trips, band field trips, was moved to Widow Island Fund. I will be honest and say, being the newbie, I was not aware of that. So I utilized those Widow Island funds for other items and then discovered that I shouldn't have. So I would like to put it back in so we don't lose that money. So I think that was it. I talked really fast.
I have a question for you.
No way.
Can you guess what that would be?
I don't know, but I won't steal your thunder. Go ahead. Did you want to ask or do you want me to just answer?
Go for it.
Okay. Okay, make them happy. Okay. So little time to prepare, but I knew my answer as soon as you asked the first time. I'd really like to look at instructional practices. So one of the goals that we've set for this year is personalized learning, which involves flexible seating. So when I look at the building and how we are in the environment that we provide the students, it's not conducive to what the students need and who they are right now. So, and our instructional practices are sometimes a reflection of our environment. So I'd like to look at altering our instructional environment with possible furniture changes, but more importantly, looking at an instructional coach so we can look at those personalized learning practices.
Thank you.
Ellen? Stacey, I have a question for you about, could you explain a little bit about the collaborative seating booths at the library? What does that look like and how would they be used? Do we have students that typically utilize the library a lot? And explain the booths. I can't quite picture what they would be.
So I had the same question. I'm like, what does that look like? So he has this image of like a booth in like a diner type
Okay.
thing, so they could sit and collaborate. So if you have group projects, we have a lot of kiddos that use our library for various things for, excuse me, for VLAX courses, if they have structured learning, things like that. So on those kids that may have unstructured time, they can collaborate with other students. So to have that privacy area, almost like in the booth, they can collaborate much more easily. So, and that's the focus that he'd like to look at. Yep.
I mean, I know it was a few years ago that they had the flex seating or and they were used quite a bit by the students.
Mhm.
I was surprised. So
Yep.
I'm curious what-
Yep. I think it would be more, sorry, I think it would be more of a private area. The collaborative seats that we have right now, very comfy. And sometimes we have the kids sitting on the floor and stuff like that. I think the collaborative area is more of, there are kids that will sit, relax, they can concentrate better that way. I think the booth is more of a sit, let's talk, and you have your own space. Like a booth in a restaurant, you have your own space, so they can collaborate there.
One of the other shifts that we made recently is that the senior lounge is no more. So that seniors now, when they have blocks off during the day and they've chosen not to leave, they go to the library. And if you were to any given day go and walk through the library, most of the kids are sitting in the black flexible leather seating, not the library tables. And during staff meetings, there is a mad dash for the black leather chairs as opposed to the break your toe other ones.
And what we're looking at is the seating as being more circular tables for kids to collaborate at, as well as the seating, having those options there, different types of seats, different types of areas that they can be more flexible, putting them on casters so we can move them around and alter the space. So having those options.
I have a question about the funding for athletics. So and this gets to a little bit of what might have been said before, sort of along what Mitch said about, some of the costs, and are we beyond, for example, just being able to repair certain things or whatever. So there's a large amount of money in this budget for athletics, but the sports seem to be highly selective. And I'll give you an example. It's been a long time since I've seen a significant investment in the budget here for track. Yet we have high performing. We've had some for a number of years. This year it's the boys, some individual girls. Last year it was girls cross and individual girls. Very high performing in the running events. Now cross is easy, right? You need woods to run through and a timer and a few other things. But we don't have a track. And it is essentially deteriorated to the point where you're looking at a bond to actually put in a track thing, right? And there is, and will the district consider funding a sport which has had some very successful athletes at the state level along the lines that we fund other sports like volleyball and basketball and others. And if I can add, a sport which, unlike some other sports, are truly inclusive of both genders on the team, whereas wrestling, for example, is traditionally male dominated.
John, I think you bring up a great point. And my understanding is that this has been discussed at different intervals, that there was some nostalgia about us being one of the only non-track, I don't know what you would call
We have a dirt strip.
No, I know what we have, but I don't know what the actual track is called, but a formal track. So I know that it would be very similar to us saying that we need to replace the gym. It's not, my understanding from the cost of what it would be for us to put down a track is not redoing the infield of the softball field. It would be like redoing the gym. It's a pretty big undertaking. And I think that that's something that, because of where we've been fiscally, I don't think that that's been brought forward. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like we've been fiscally conservative over the past number of years. So I mean, I'd love to see that. I think it'd be great. I'd love to see a nice set of bleachers too, but I just don't know if those
It's a bond
constraints.
item, and it's often combined with bond items. That's a bond that supports other sports. So in other words, the interior being used for soccer or field hockey, for example, whether it be turf or whether it be grass, for example.
Well, I think our community would probably support something in the athletic realm.
And how you market it, right?
Sure.
And who it serves. So.
Can I just ask, are you looking at like an indoor arena type thing? Is that what you were speaking of, or the outside outdoor track?
Just like, a rubberized surface paved track, maybe a sand pit or triple jump spot to put pads and stuff for the high jump, right? All of those, a space where for track meets you can have javelin, discus, and those types of things in a more traditionally organized sort of thing. I mean, as it is for track, we pretty much go other places. They have a meet that's kind of fun and kind of catchy, but it's bizarre. It's unique in and of itself because the athletes can't run on the type of track on which they're prepared to run. But it doesn't have to be just track. Like I said, the interior is frequently used for other things and set up for other things. So I had one other athletic question. I'm apologize. It's going to fall to you because I've been joined by my significant other not to ask Kevin questions. So we invest time and stuff for our middle school athletes to go to the town fields. Why don't they, is it a transportation issue that they don't use the ginormous fields that we have here that we manage?
Well, I
believe they do. I believe that.
I believe one of the things that John has been working on is trying to have each of the teams play at the fields at one point or another. I didn't even think about the transportation, but yeah, that would be that could be an issue. But again, we do maintain the fields at Boynton, even though they're not at Boynton.
Okay.
Any other questions? I'm sorry, my allergies, whatever's coming in tomorrow is killing me. While we didn't specifically discuss the track, there were two capital issues that we did talk about. One was the gym, and the other, I'm sure anybody who's been in there and sat there in the last 10 years, is the auditorium. We not only have chairs that are broken and whatever, we have carpeting that is disgusting, but we also now are beginning to move into an area where we're going to have, and Craig, you can back me up on this, safety issues from the juniors and whatever lighting that's overhead. So, those, you're right. It has to be presented the right way to the community. They can't cut $300,000 from us and have us do that. But all three are important. I mean, I ran track, so I know what you're saying. But the gym, the track, and certainly the multi-use of the gym and the multi-use of the auditorium, we discussed that quite a bit, from choral to plays to whatever. So that's a good question.
And in the near future, we're going to be done with the bond payment on the elementary school. So
we're talking 18 months.
Yeah. So we've kind of talked about looking down the road, with that bond done, are there other opportunities for big improvement projects?
Great. Any other questions or comments from there? Okay.
Up next is special ed with Kristen TV-Pop.
Thank you. I'm going to try my best to give an overall synopsis of both the student services budget changes. But before I do that, I'm really data driven. I work in the field of special ed, so data is important. And just to give people kind of an understanding when it comes to special ed and student services, in 2023, special education services cost New Hampshire districts $915,220,910.61. They received aid, whether that be from the feds or from the state, of $159,853,362.86, which means $755 million had to be made up by local property taxes. So I just want to lay that out, along with the fact that special education is a requirement. We have to provide a free and appropriate public education to all students that come across our doorstep, even students that aren't in our schools, like charter schools. We still are obligated to provide special education services and supports to them as well. So just a little kind of rundown of special ed. So we'll talk about the changes in the budget before I just give a kind of a synopsis of staffing. So the student services budget, because it's not just special education, this includes McKinney-Vento, it includes 504s, it includes our responsibilities for charter schools, went up by $80,000. That increase is due to $27,000 in transportation, about $40,000 in student services, which are our contracted services provided by our .com, who's our speech and language therapists that work at the middle and the high school. We had to add on some additional hours at Highbridge Hill Elementary due to an influx of students requiring speech and language services. 6,000 was added for digital 504 program. We at Messinic still do paper and pencil, which is really dinosaur-esque, and it's very hard to maintain, and compliance is really essential. Most complaints that come across to OCR are based on 504s, and we currently do not have a computerized way to keep track of those. What else is in there? $3,000 for charter school special education legal costs. That was due to some, how do I put it? Some questions that we had in regards to our responsibility towards charter schools. And I'm expecting that to continue. Just so everyone knows, our obligation for charter schools is an unfunded mandate. That be the dyslexia screening, as well as us providing specialized services and supports to charter schools. We're required to do it. We do not get the funding to do that. I will go way more into detail. If anyone ever has any questions, just reach out to me. There's some increase in protocol costs. Protocols are the paper evaluations that we utilize to assess students academically, cognitively, ADHD, just across the board. Those protocols have been significantly increasing. We luckily have been using some funds from ESSER to kind of, I don't want to say stockpile, we're not stockpiling, but use those funds so we don't have to necessarily use budget funds for those items that are increasing. There was also an increase of $1,000 to Medicaid. This is what we pay MSB, who is our biller. That increase is due to our occupational therapist now being able to bill for Medicaid services. She acquired a waiver prior to, has not been able to bill, and that's due to Medicare law and how they're seen. Now she is able to bill. So Medicaid monies come back to the general fund. It does not hit the student services line, so you won't see that. That's in revenues that Rachel kind of deals with. Does anyone have any questions on that I spoke of before I get to just a quick thing on the staffing and the needs of the district and what changes we have had?
Could you
Yes.
explain our obligation with respect to the charter school issue you mentioned a little further?
Sure. So, and I'm just going to use some averages here. So we get, if a student goes to a public charter school, wherever it may be in the state, PLAX is also included. The district of residence is required to provide special education services, supports, and accommodations, even accommodations, which are classroom specific, to students that attend charter schools. We get, for a special ed student, about $1,900 for having that student in our special education system. Charter schools for that student get $9,000, which is way more than we get, even with base adequacy. We are required, due to RSA, and we're the only state in this entire United States that does this, where we are the LEAs for special ed, and the charter school is not the LEA. We are the only state. LEA, Local Education Agency. So those charter school students are basically on my caseload. So I have to case manage those students. Last year, we sent a paraprofessional to a charter school. That cost us about $15,000 just for a half hour of service. So
Essentially, we're treating them like they're here.
Correct.
Right? Even though they're somewhere else in another, paying to go to another school, getting funds from another, from the state, we have to incorporate and do all that. So, and that's been a challenge.
Just so if I understand correctly, the charter school, I understand the charter school gets the 9,000 plus, you know, for the student, where, and I think something like 4,100 for a student here. But we get nothing for the special ed?
$1,800.
$1,800. Okay. Wow, that's yeah, I don't, boy, that's a lot of money.
$1,800 is really takes up my case management time for the year. I mean, not that and there's quite a few charter schools. But again, that's due to New Hampshire RSA that we have to follow. But I will say it's unfunded, which means we don't get monies for that, but it would really take a bunch of districts getting together and filing a case like we did with Conval. Otherwise, it's business as usual with RSAs. It's nothing that we can do or I can do to change that.
How many students do we currently have in this situation?
I would hesitate to give a number of identified students just because I mean, we have a bunch of students that attend charter schools. Charter schools in Keene and in Peterborough. I would hate to give the amount of kiddos, just because we're walking a line. I'm very kind of
I understand.
Of privacy.
of privacy. Yeah, I mean, you know, I could, you know, you could call me and I can give you a rundown, but just because I think it.
I have some general numbers. We have about 30 students right now currently at, and this is not just special, this is not all students, at the charter school in Peterborough. About 30, about 30. And some of those are special ed students. And just to give you a reference, when we went over to do the dyslexia screening for the K through 3, it took 3 days, 2 staff members of ours to do that.
So we could go on and on about charter schools, but are there any questions on the increase in budget? And
Mitch asked my question.
Okay. All right. Mitch, follow up.
Yeah, this is more of a process question. I've been associated with the CAST project, as you probably have heard. In the focus groups that we conducted, that the project conducted, some of the feedback that we got from both teachers and parents gave the appearance that there was some confusion as to whether a teacher could recommend to a parent to have their child evaluated for special ed. And there was confusion as to who does what. And it kind of left, I'm sure, other members of the group, but myself thinking, I wonder if there were students that would have qualified for special ed or needed special ed that fell through the cracks because of that confusion. So, and I imagine you've heard this kind of feedback as well from the focus groups. Do you think that there have been students that have been missed that confusion?
I think this is my 7th budget year. I don't know. Because we take really detailed data. We gather really detailed data. I read the CAS report in detail and I saw that. And I think we're going to answer those questions with the CAS report. But I mean, personally, no, I do not think kids have fallen through the cracks. I think teachers don't quite understand the special ed process. And just because a child is struggling does not mean they have a disability. And that's what it is. That's what it is. And that's just clarification on our part, but I think we get into that with the discussion on the CAST recommendations.
The only other thing I would add to that is that that our identification at Highbridge Hill highlighted our need to implement a multi-tiered system of support for students in a way that is more inclusive of some additional intervention steps for students. That before when we've identified a student is struggling, we need to build some protocols and some resources into the work that we are doing with students to gather data and provide services to them before we're identifying them as special ed. When we hit the point of difficulty, currently we have a few resources that support that. The first layer is the classroom teacher, right? We've got difficulty, the classroom teacher puts their resources and energy and effort into supporting that student. But at some point, the teacher isn't the right tool or mechanism for the student. They need more than the teacher is able to offer. Then we move maybe to Title I or the reading supervisor. We've added now that reading writing teacher to support this effort. So we've got a layer now of folks who are able to hit what we would call tier 2. Our teachers provide tier 1. Our Title I folks, our reading specialists, etc., they provide our tier 2 supports. And then there's a tier 3, which is those same folks, but a much more intensive approach. And then we might recommend at that point, when we still see a student is not making progress, we will refer to special ed. That multi-tiered system of support is going to take us a bit of time to build out, but it is one of the reasons we are identified as a CSI school and a huge component of that plan. So I agree with Kristen. I don't think we have students who are falling through the cracks. I think what we have is the need to build out some of those intermediate steps before we get to special education.
And when you said it takes a period of time, I have no idea what that is. So what would that look like?
So it's going to take us a couple of years to get there. So we've already started that process with our CSI funding. We're bringing in resources. We have brought in some additional staff. We have changed the way we are implementing Title I. We just had 2 Title I teachers in the past. We will have 2 full-time teachers and 2 paraprofessionals supporting. So that's already 3 additional people who are working to solve the same problem. That's an amazing bunch of folks. We are bringing in some digital resources to help navigate the diagnostic process of this and also the skill-based intervention piece. Sometimes kids need some practice on things like math facts, on things like letter identification. Those things can be done in the digital space and free up teacher time to do some of the more intensive and detailed work with students. So it's going to take us a bit. We've got to bring resources in. We've got to train our staff to be able to manage the new resources and tools. And we've got to provide a specific mechanism for moving through each of these steps and tracking where students have been. A lot of that work is being done this year. It will likely take us another 2 before we get really, really good at this.
Thank you.
Yes. Could you go over the McKinney-Vento, the buses to that?
Sure. So we are obligated if a student has been deemed homeless in our, they're a student of ours, but they have lost their home and they live in Jaffrey. We go through some paperwork and deem them eligible for McKinney-Vento. This is, again, another mandate that's unfunded. Between our district and Jaffrey, we agree to best interest determination, which means should the kiddos still stay in Messinic or should they go to Jaffrey? What usually happens is we cost split transportation, where Jaffrey has to agree to pay half the transportation because the child does, reside there, and we take the other half. We last year didn't require transportation for any students. The year before that, it was pretty significant. We were transporting from Nashua, a family of students. And again, our obligation is to ensure, kind of educational normalcy for the students. They shouldn't be pulled in and out of schools. So,
Kristen, I would just add, that's regardless of, that is not just special education. Student.
No.
That would be any student deemed to fit that category.
Right. So this budget is not just special education, it's student services, which encompasses way more than just special ed.
So I have a sort of a general budget presentation question, but it came up in a community member asking some questions about the budget. And this is a community member who I will say has been elected to many positions in New Ipswich, is a highly educated person and believes in education. But he doesn't trust the process. And I think one of his concerns is seen here because, and the other one is a concern that I have, is that here we list the actual expenditures, but we don't list what was voted or approved. So, and then when I looked for that, right? So we look here at the budget, it said 24, there's 23 actual, 24 actual. So the question is, what do we actually budget? So in other words, so like tonight, when I went to look at that, I can't find that online on the school board website with this detail right now. Because some folks want to know that, what do we budget versus what do we spend? Right? So I think that would be an easy way to add a couple of cells here to this very public document that just gives some transparency. So maybe I missed it. So that goes back to my meeting, the meeting that we had, we talked about the budget, and I think Steve was there and Liz was there. And if I recall correctly, the comment was that special ed often returns funds to the general budget. And personally, I think the special ed budget is underfunded. And I think it's underfunded because of the contingency that it takes a small number of high need students to blow out this budget. Just 2 that need out of district placement would be more than what's budgeted for, would be a 20% increase in this. So maybe and this is hard from a money perspective, right? But from a community perspective, I think this budget is too small. But I also think that if it is returning money to the general budget at the end of every year, which I know folks know that gets, reduces the tax burden on the other thing, or can be redistributed and all of that, right? That be made more clear. And that if we do that, and we do need more of a contingency just in case, that we figure out a way mechanistically to either put this in a budget or in a capital reserve so everyone knows what it is and why it's there. So, and I don't know if you can have capital reserve budgets, and I know it's awkward, right? But it seems to me like that would be more transparent than just having a budget overall that's bigger than what you use most years.
So just to go off what you're saying, when I get to the part about staffing, you're going to see why this stuff budget is very different from staffing. This year, special ed's really reached a point where the service providers, the case managers are at a workload max. And we don't look at caseload, like how many students they have. I will tell you from when I started to now, we have 40 additional students. We're very close to Jaffrey Ringe, maybe 30 IEPs. They have significantly more staff than we have, which is why, looking at the case managers and the service providers, we need more folks to be able to service our students. Hopefully to not send them out of district. Our goal is not to send students out of district. kids will move in like they did last year, but our goal is always to keep them in school, in the least restrictive environment with as much supports as they want. So do you want me to just talk about the staffing changes or proposed?
I don't begrudge you on that at all. That
Okay.
People are at the limit and they're being overworked.
Yeah.
I just think we have, I'll say a moral first, but also legal obligation. And we talked about your average number of students that have been growing every year. I can't see where the need for out-of-district placements stays constant or doesn't increase in the next few years. And those are budget busters with regards to this part of the budget. Even if we don't want to do it, it seems like just the numbers of the students coming in and the services they need, that is likely to increase. And it would be wise to budget for that in whatever way and to do so as transparently as possible.
Sure. But and this could be a conversation between you and I with how the decision is made to place a student. We have many students that have come to us from self-contained rooms and they're thriving here in our district. Could we have placed them out of district? Yes. Is this budget conservative? Yes, it is. Is the payroll budget a requirement? I like to say require and needs because requirement is higher than needs. I think that with these additions to staffing, we could lower our out-of-district students, which is what we have done in the past. Bring on a BCBA so we can have FBAs and get ABA in school. We don't need to put a student into an autism-specific program. So it's that kind of, expanding occupational therapy. We have one occupational therapist for all 3 schools. We needed additional, but we were only part-time with her before. So that keeps kids in school. We can provide services here in Messinic, as opposed to saying, oh, we don't have those people. We do have those people now. We need more people in order to go off exactly what you're saying, keep students in district, because out-of-district placements are enormous. And the state will not refund any money back to us. It's called CAD aid until we expend 3.5 per pupil cost, which is this year $78,000. So this district has to pay $78,000 before the state gives us any money back, and that's only paid at 60%. So you and I can have the out-of-district costs, but I really stay on top of who I think maybe moved out of district, who may not move in out of district. And we did have a kiddo move in that was pretty high needs, and our budget still did not exceed. I think special ed for the past 6 years has not gone over, and we have not used capital expenditures either.
Yeah, Kristen, can you talk a little bit about capital reserve?
Sure. Until now, it comes when we need more staff. We need more case managers. Currently, our IDA grant fund is filled with 3 case managers, and it has been for the past 6+ years. Speaking with our grants manager, that should really be the way it is. IDA funds should be used for different programs or different positions that we're trying out, see if we, really need them. I'm going to probably, if I can contract, I'm going to probably have to use capital expenditures this year due to the increase of 8 high need students at Boynton. That's just 8 students in one school. We're talking workload, not just, oh, they have an IEP. These are students that get services 5 times a week, 3 times a day, para support, service provider. So that's when I talk about high needs. I'm going to have to use capital expenditure this year. Next year, when Rachel and Liz and I sat down, I said, you know what, we really need to pull 2 case managers out, put them in our general budget, so we can use IDA to add an additional case manager and a CODA, which is an occupational therapy assistant, which can provide services. Again, we have 1 occupational therapist, 1 BCBA. This district is not like what it was 6 years ago. And I've been here since then. It's just workload capacity. We're not going to be able to continue to provide for students like we have been if something doesn't give. The RBT.
On the capital reserves.
Sure.
with the needs you're seeing, have we been contributing enough to that fund, and are we planning to contribute more this year, I would assume?
So I think the capital reserve has been capped. It's like 4 something, and we haven't used it in the past 6 years. We will now.
That's one of the hard pieces about this, right? Is that we have a capital reserve that we haven't utilized in a number of years, and it's at $447,000 right now. So we haven't added anything into it recently because we haven't used it. You know, that's a good chunk of money. You know, again, we had an odd, and I will say this, it was an odd influx this year, right in the very end of August. So, and again, I think that the fact that we're going to have to potentially access capital reserve funds this year demonstrates the need to me. That shows that we have a different need than we have had before.
And I do not expect the growth to stop. You know, houses are being built here. You know, people from Massachusetts are moving into New Ipswich. It's just not from Massachusetts. Londonderry, Somersworth, just a lot of different places. I think that might, I don't know, have higher property taxes, and here real estate is, you know, a little bit lower than say in the Litchfield area, et cetera. So we're just seeing many people move in and purchase homes in the district, which is across the Southwest region. All the other districts are seeing it as well. They aren't as strapped from a resources like a person as we are. So I know it's a lot. So, but I do have numbers and data to explain why we require an RBT, why we require a CODA, and why we require additional case managers. You gonna ask me your question, Rick?
You know, I don't think so.
Answer it. No, I really have this.
She was ready.
No, I
Yeah, you were ready.
was.
I did, but I do have a comment, and then I do have a question that I'd like to ask Rachel. First of all, you know, listening to all of you, I just feel very strongly that you all do an incredible job, you know, in terms of managing your areas and trying to make magic, you know, with beans. So I just want to say, you know, I'm very impressed and admire the work that you're all doing and the command that you have over what's happening in your budget and what the needs in your segment are. So thank you very much for what you're doing. Question in terms of the overall budget is there a way for us in the ABC to have a sense of how much of the increase, you know, I'm not talking about personnel, I'm talking about operational expenses, how much of the increase is due to inflation? And I know that varies from area to area, whether it's supplies, whether it's utilities, et cetera, et cetera. When I look at the numbers, I don't know how much of the increase is beyond our control because of inflation and because of what, you know, vendors are adding on because of that.
I would say at least 3/4 of it is inflation related, especially the health insurance premiums. That's all being driven by inflation. And in that alone, the estimate, I think, is 234,000 additional, which is about 1/4 of the overall increase we're looking at. In likelihood, it will be more, but as far as the estimate, yeah, I would say a good, at least 3/4 is inflation driven.
And I don't know how this works out with who moves into them when you talk about folks moving into New Ipswich. It is not impossible to conceive, because of what's before the planning board now, that there will be at least 40 new single-family homes built in developments before the beginning of the next school year. And that excludes like 1 and 2 house subdivisions, because there's like a 29 and there's like a 10 that are on the state.
That's just New Ipswich.
And that's just New Ipswich. That's not Greenville, right, which has its own plan, and that's not sort of other things that'll happen with that. So
Could I answer your question?
Oh, I don't,
Of course.
I want to ask, I want to take just a moment. Hey, Mitch's question. You answer
Thank
it?
you. No, I
Yeah.
didn't. So if I had all the money in the world, for this district, I would love to have us build, and have it contained, at the middle school, an alternative learning program where students come in half the day, and get their academics, and the other half the day is therapeutic intervention, for kids. And when I talk of intervention, it's not like counseling, sitting down. It's really like hands-on stuff, going out and building a garden. I've seen a lot of schools that are very successful with that. A lot of our students on the spectrum do really well with that.
Mhm.
And we don't have that ability. That plus I'd love 2 special ed coordinators. But that's really it.
Very good. Thank you.
A chocolate fountain. Chocolate fountain.
I'm going to jump in for a minute. I was going to hold this to the end, but this seems like a good time to talk about it. I'd written a note down here. I think it's very important, and let me say this slowly for the people who are listening and not in the room. Our state ranks 50th in aid to education, and we are falling to the two-headed monster of unfunded mandates and expenses, some of which you've heard tonight, where we have to provide services to schools that don't have charter schools and whatever. That's a cost item for us that is killing us. And we're losing to that two-headed monster. I can't say that enough. If you look at the way a public school is set up, we have to accept, not that it's a bad thing, but we have to accept all comers. And we are not keeping up with that. As Rachel mentioned with insurance, the potential raise for our insurance is the range of like 9 to 19%. We won't know that until Wednesday. So I want people to really talk among members of the community. If the state continues to give more money to charter schools and continues to place the burden for services and whatever on the district, we're at the floor, folks. You know, we're headed to the basement and there's nothing stored in the basement. So we really have those two problems. We have a revenue problem and we have an expense and unfunded mandate problem. And for me, the picture's fairly bleak over the next 3 to 5 years, despite us having personnel who, as you've seen tonight, are experts in their field and have done a tremendous job in budgeting. But the numbers just don't add up. In my world, that's the way I look at it. Come to the bottom line. Do I even get close to a zero-sum game or ahead? Well, those days are gone. When we see in health insurance and other expenses going up at the rate they're going up, unless we get more state aid, we're going to be facing this every single budget cycle, and it's only going to get worse. Liz?
I agree.
As to next in the
Oh,
budget.
next is our technology director, Michelle Tatro.
Thank you. So we've had the tech department's had a few increases this year. The first one would be found in the school software line. We're looking to add a plugin to PowerSchool to streamline our enrollment process. Currently, everyone is enrolling their students using paper. It's causing some problems and errors that admin have to fix all the time. And it's kind of archaic. This program right here called Enrollment Express will enable parents and families to enroll their kids directly in the PowerSchool platform and the changes will be immediate. Anytime that they need to make a change, it'll be right. It'll show up immediately. It'll also help in households where the students go to different households where it's not a two-parent household, because I'm finding a lot of errors in there when there's 2 different primary contacts that need to be in the system in the demographics area. This plugin will also allow for signing up for sports to be more automated and streamlined, signing waivers, things like Chromebook use waivers, sports waivers, things like that, instead of having to send out a giant package of paperwork and then having administration have to enter all the information and make sure it's correct. It just cuts out that step and makes it less likely to have errors and problems and more immediate. It actually doesn't add a whole lot to the budget. So the initial cost is $5,061.78, and that includes the setup. The yearly renewal will be $3,150. But I looked back at the past few years for our tech software subscription renewals, and they were set at a 7% escalation, and it really seemed a little steep to me. I did the math, and it more was coming out to closer to 4 to 5%. So I reduced that escalation to 5%. And so you see the increase actually isn't all that much, even with the new plugin added. Probably if you skip down, our biggest increase is going to be for Chromebook replacements. I believe those were all funded through the ESSER grant before, and those are obviously depleted now. So we have to take on the cost of replacing the Chromebooks. The way we've been doing it the past few years is giving new Chromebooks to all of the incoming 3rd and 8th graders, and that allows for a 5-year cycle in between. So they'll keep the same Chromebook theoretically for 5 years before they get a new Chromebook. It's important because, you know, first of all, there's the hardware, the actual physical device, the wear and tear of kids using them. They don't last forever. But then also the software aspect and actually being able to send updates to the Chromebooks. They're only supported for a certain number of years. So after a while, you can't get updates to them anymore, and then they become a security liability. So I've put in 450 Chromebooks to cover the incoming 3rd and 8th graders. That also allows for a few extras because we have ones that don't quite make it the full 5 years. So that's probably the biggest, that's the biggest increase. It's down under the district software, which is kind of the bones of everything. It's software that isn't specifically educational software. Things like our wireless and our invoicing, things like that. DNS filter securely. Securely is what filters all of our students and staff, prevents them from going to inappropriate websites, sends notifications if students search for certain things, stuff like that. Again, I reduced it to a 5% increase because the 7% just it seemed a little steep. So I was just trying to be conservative there. And there's nothing new in that category that I could see. Replacing laptops for staff would also be another increase. And we have numerous staff members, teachers who are using older computers. A lot of them have issues. We have certain teachers who, like, their network adapter doesn't work. They can't plug in, or they can't use the Ethernet, or they can't use the Wi-Fi, things like that. So we have a number of staff members who could really use new laptops, and they're kind of making do with what they have. And if one goes down, we don't have a lot of spares. We don't really have any spares. So I'd like to replace, I put in for 2 in each building, 6 total. And that was kind of a conservative guess also. In the district tech new equipment, this category is meant to cover, we need some new modules for our switches. Like a few days ago, we had one go down at a high bridge, and we really don't have any backups or margin there's no margin for error in that department. So we really need to replace some of those. They're kind of old. Let's see. And battery backup. So we don't have, apparently none of our servers have any sort of uninterruptible power supply. So if there's any sort of blackout or power surges or anything like that, we could end up with a lot more downtime. So I'd like to get some on there. I feel like that would be important. That's about it for increases.
The other thing that we added is a $10,000 to start a capital reserve for technology. One of the terrifying PDs that I've attended recently talks about cybersecurity and about the again, I know we're not a big district like Nashua, but they talked a little bit about the fiscal issues related to the hack in Nashua a few years ago, and they kind of related cybersecurity to toilet paper. You take it for granted until you don't have it. And I walked away and I called Michelle and we met the other day to discuss it because I was like,
There has to be a better analogy.
I thought it was pretty good.
It's a good one.
It was a little terrifying to kind of talk about, but so again, the capital reserve would not begin to cover a security hack. Let me just put that out there. It wouldn't begin. I think it cost Nashua upwards of $900,000. So it would not begin to cover that. But what it could cover is if one of our servers accidentally goes down, or we need another module, or there was an accident and 3 laptops broke, and we needed to get some more. So we want to start that fund and start adding to that because we're going to be using technology, from here on out. So just wanted to speak to that.
Question?
Yeah. So under the software, what is Google for? Is that for the Google Suite?
Yeah, I mean, we use Google for everything. That's what everybody uses for their logins, their accounts. And we get licenses that allow us to do extra things like be able to stream this meeting, for instance. We require our Google license to do that.
All right. So, and this is not a big dollar amount, and this may be more instructional than anything. I see 3 allocations for Encyclopedia Britannica. And this may be curricular as well as tech, right? And I don't want to inflame any tension by suggesting that we wouldn't validate what we see in it. But in my business world, everybody's using ChatGPT, and they're using it as generative AI and seeing what comes up on ChatGPT or something, and then verifying it like you would from any other source. I don't know if that's a tech thing or if that's a curricular.
So I think the benefit of Encyclopedia Britannica over ChatGPT would be just the fact that it's vetted. It's, more for kids.
AI is another process that takes us a little bit to get into. There are some policy updates that we need to do internally. And we need to prepare, again, our staff with professional development around how to leverage AI to be a tool and a strategy to help our students be ready for the workforce. I know that ChatGPT has been useful even in the work that I do. I'm able to look at a variety of work samples and say, okay, this is where I want to go. And so that's been helpful. We have to train teachers to train children to be able to use that. And our teachers have a variety of skill sets in order and entry points for that. So a little more down the road for us, but something we're thinking about.
I'd like to attach a comment to that. Also with ChatGPT, there's an idea that critical thinking is really important. Just because a language learning module, a large learning module says this is the answer, we still have a structured way to do some critical thinking to make sure it's verifiable, reproducible, and whatnot.
You can use critical thinking, so we can debate whether critical thinking and how that goes in the context of what you use to gather information.
Correct, correct. But it's a little bit more nuanced than just waving a hand at AI.
Anyone else?
All right, next is our curriculum line, and that's Melissa Gray.
The curriculum budget stays pretty stationary from year to year. There's not a lot to increase here. One of the things I'll say about our curriculum budget is some years we use it and some years we don't. There are a couple of things that we have earmarked specifically into the curriculum budget for that we did for FY25 and we will do again for FY26. Specifically, some things that were sitting in Enter previously, like Swank. Swank is a video movie platform that our staff use to enhance instruction. One of the things that we've run into quite a bit this year is a turnover in staff, and how a turnover in staff impacts what we need for instructional materials. Sometimes those things happen in August, and we had no way to anticipate that turnover was going to happen or that we were going to need a particular curriculum item. So while this looks like you'll see a very amount at each of our schools, it's really following a need to be determined. The other things that are here are contracted tuition reimbursement lines. That's part of a contract. I haven't typically put that in, but we have decided that we want to do that. If I am not here, then you want somebody to be able to have access to that resource. And then association dues is another, and then a very nominal amount for travel. Again, just traveling to different conferences or the regional events with our Southwest partners.
Mitch, do you have anyone?
No, I don't.
No. Folks?
Yeah, I think we can take any general questions.
Questions now, yeah. Any general questions, inputs, comments? Tom?
Yes, can you give us the population numbers for this year, what you think it's going to be here next year? Are you saying the population is going up in the school? We have more students?
So,
and if you give us a cost per student?
we don't have the cost per pupil yet, because that information hasn't come out from the state. We're still seeing a transient population. So again, just like Kristen was talking about a group coming in, we have kids leave as well. I believe our numbers are up a little bit, but nothing.
What is the number?
I believe it's 908. I think it's 908, but I could have that could be my area code in New Jersey. Oh. $912, but and that may or may not include the $912, and that does include some of the students at the high school that are Conant students. So because they are our students when they're here.
Can I just add in that does not include charter school students in that amount that we have to service. Just
good point. Yeah.
Oh, that was my question. How many are in charter schools? We've got 9, 12, and it's.
In total,
Yeah.
I think we said about 30. We have about 30 at thank you, at Lionheart.
Something completely different. The transportation contract, and I heard earlier it's a 5-year contract. Can somebody remind us or remind me where we are in that 5 years?
This is year 3,
Year 3?
correct,
Okay, so it'll be coming up in 2 years.
correct.
All right, thanks.
I'm giving people a chance to think about just while we're here.
If we have any other questions about enrollment numbers and whatnot, I can think out to you guys and
Yeah, and the ABC can use the budget document, that questions document. Rachel and I can really start checking that a little bit more frequently, for sure.
Yeah, and I would only ask, in prior years, the ABC's been so good about getting to us as soon as they have a question or they have a suggestion so that they can begin to work on the numbers. So, absolutely, Ed.
Mr. Chair, if I-
Yes.
John, you asked a question earlier about actuals versus voted. And while it's not evident in these particular documents, largely because this is the format that we've used, and our document can run on forever. It's quite hefty as it is. However, that material is available on our website, or we can certainly point folks in the direction or give you those actual voted documents in our published budgets.
Yeah, but I also think it needs to be out there more for everybody. Show that the district is trying to get close, you're spending close to what you're budgeting and not budgeting so much. And then, you go through this cycle, you tax, and then you return, you tax, and then you return, you tax, and then you return. It's just, in this specific case, in some cases, it doesn't help with the trust on some portion of the budget.
And I
I
think-
realize it's not possible to do always a budget that's within 1 or 2% of what your expenditures are. But if it's cyclic and it's constantly happening over and over and over and over again, then that's problematic.
Well, one of the things that got our reach has traditionally been feeding our return is not unfilling positions. If we've budgeted for a position because we really need that position, but we weren't able to find a person to fill that role, that, a position can be up to $100,000. So when there's 1 or 2, boy, that, and plus their benefits, et cetera, that really kind of gets up there.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I would also like to add that our auditors recommend a 4 to 5% surplus cushion. And that's pretty much where we're at traditionally. There's been a few years that we've had a little bit more than that, but that's what they recommend for cash flow purposes.
I think the other thing that's reasonable to point out is, Rachel, you can help me out on this, but I believe it was about 8 years ago that the ABC recommended that we get rid of all the contingency lines that were built into the budget. And that changed the look of the budget as well. So we had contingencies for special ed and for all built into the budget. So when we got rid of those, it really came down to mostly unfilled positions. Any other questions or thought? And I was not trying to name drop here. Yeah, feedback, comments, questions, thoughts, anything, we've got time here. Okay, we're all good? Julie, I'm so surprised I haven't heard anything from you. I don't know what to do with that, actually. I'm just.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. Ed, you had something you wanted to add?
I know we will have more questions and we won't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you.
As soon as we can.
It's been a great help. Rachel?
Yeah, so just if you're looking at the full budget document, you see the total numbers where it's up 5%, which is $995,000. If you look at the summary sheet or the recap, the highlights, those total about 1.1 million. So you're kind of seeing where those increases are coming from. So it would be helpful to, and I'm speaking to the board, if we could have some feedback on any of those, if there's things that you see that, definitely know, or definitely something you want to add, for
I agree.
future drafts, it would be helpful to know that, and speak up about it. Thank you.
The other thing is we're trying to avoid getting down to a 5-point print on these things. Tom?
Yes, one other thing, Rachel. The food service, is the participation rate up or down? And we budgeted are we budgeted 430,000 over the last few years, but yet we got a $60,000 debt service. I mean, does that mean, is that 60 in this year's budget?
So that's a very good question. I looked back at our food service invoices, and so how that works is they bill us for actual costs plus a management fee.
Right.
And it's been around 430, but I see it's creeping up because of food costs are drastically increasing, labor costs are drastically increasing. And while sales are pretty steady, with the increases, there's going to be a gap there. And what traditionally has been happening is at the end of the year, we have to make the food service fund whole. So it's a break-even program. And so we've had to take money out of the general fund and put it into the food service fund for it to break even. And with the budget being so tight and with filling all our positions, I don't know going forward if we're going to have that extra money in the general fund to make up for that loss.
That was my question. Do you think that this is the time to put money in for the uncollected funds and the losses that we have in that? I can't remember a year where we didn't have a loss.
Yeah, so I'm budgeting for a $60,000 loss in this budget.
Okay, yeah, that was my question.
Yeah.
And I will say, the superintendent, myself and others, we have been talking with Fresh Picks and we've been trying to look at issues and ways we might address that. That it? Thank you all for coming. I really, it's a great assist to the board. Yeah, would you like one? Mitch has asked for a 5-minute break, so could we suspend? I think everybody could use a little stretch of the legs. Yes, I think that's fine.
Kristen, I don't think it's a late night.
Take it back.
I know, like, do you want to say, Kristen? No.
She did say she wanted to.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. I didn't
notice. Kristen, and he's track ordered things.
It's 8, 9, I haven't even done my work.
He's gonna bring you up at MCSS.
Have a good night. Rachel, again, I don't. Is your pain? Yeah. What? I don't know if you need to stay there.
Talk to the land.
Are you being serious?
Go.
This is my jam. I like this stuff.
Nice job, Rachel.
The two guys go up there that do the order. Yeah. I think they're out there because Saturday, probably about 7:30-ish, you can hear a couple of shots. And we're talking hundreds of acres. Yes. And the sun. We're going out. Just so you know, it's what we'll be. This is where I'm sitting. I said, it was all right. Where I enter, where right on the process. Sorry.
Yes. You know, it's like you're coming, you ask this question, you had 3 to 2.
Okay. Do you have anything more you want to add, Liz or Melissa?
Unfortunately, yes.
Okay, well, no, not unfortunately, but Dr.
Sorry.
Pogorzelski, let's
And I
pick up
think
now
this
that
is
we've done the budget.
I think it's a perfect example of how, despite the budget process, we have to continue doing our regular stuff. So I'm not going to go over my celebrations. You can all read that in my board report. We did have some and still have some teams in the
Right.
in the
Mix.
playoffs.
Yeah.
Halloween was great. It was wonderful to see the different. First of all, you could not pay me enough to be an elementary school teacher just because of the holidays. I can't imagine the level of excitement. I know how excited my kids were. Never mind dealing with the whole classroom full of them. It was very warm, so watching the spook parade, they were so tired and hot in some of the heavy costumes.
Oh, yeah.
Those poor kids and those poor teachers, they had planned for cold weather. So that was wonderful to see. I included in my report a piece about inclement weather. It's kind of weird to be talking about that considering tomorrow's going to be 70 degrees.
Yeah.
But tomorrow's supposed to be 70. But I wanted to put it out there,
Yeah.
and I will be putting this message out to the community in the next few weeks, just reminding everybody this is our process. This is what this means. This is where everything will be posted. What I really want to draw everyone's attention to is the YRBS. It's the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. This is a national survey. It is a vetted survey. It is, according to our school, our district social worker, it is the gold standard for surveys. It monitors types of health risk behaviors that contribute to the leading causes of death and disability among youth and adults. And it is uncomfortable because it can feel very intrusive. I think I linked in here the survey. I linked in the rationale for the surveys. I linked in a bunch of videos to watch. I think that this data is important because we are already dealing with many of these issues. We're dealing with mental health in the schools. We're dealing with the bullying. We're dealing with issues related to violence. So I think that it's really important. I think it could help us monitor the progress of what we're currently doing. So we currently run the All-Stars program at the middle school and then our life skills program at the high school, which are both aimed at reducing and first of all, identifying high-risk students and then trying to remediate some of those issues. It could help us leverage our funding opportunities. It could break down barriers that ultimately are preventing students from accessing education. It's uncomfortable. Some of the questions relate to sexual behaviors, drug and alcohol use. And so where I stand is I believe that we should allow parents in the community to opt out if they so choose. We have to legally put this out to families at least 10 days in advance. And there's no formal opt-out like there is with some of our state testing. So if kids don't participate the day of, they don't participate the day of. If they choose to participate, you know, I think it's important. We have state data, regional data, and we can even get school-specific data, which I think would be beneficial for us, again, programming and just helping our staff to really better understand our students. And I think sometimes I think you can make assumptions that students' lives are peachy. And then when you kind of look at the data, I think sometimes it can bring to light, oh, okay, maybe I didn't realize that this was occurring in so many homes. So I'm not asking for any decision to be made on this tonight. I just simply wanted to put it in front of you so that you could all look at the data, come with questions, but I do plan on bringing this up. I do need to respond the 19th, so the day after our next board meeting. So that's where I am with that. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer that tonight.
Questions for us? Very quickly, while we're on Halloween, it was amazing. We had so many kids come to the door, and Ronan was sticking his nose around the door, and the kids are going, "Mom,
it's Ronan.
Mom, that's the one we're going to see." and she was in the schools. She was set up to be in the schools the next day.
How funny.
And the teachers were saying, are you sure you want to bring a dog through here the day after Halloween? But it went well, but it was just a scream to go, no, that's him. And the heck with the candy. So, yeah, I'm really pleased with the reaction that they've had to the animal. Melissa.
My report is included there for you. I wanted to bring before the board the baseline data, our fall NWEA data and our Acadians data for literacy. I spent the first page there just running you through the logistics of reading the data, which can be sometimes cumbersome if you're not familiar with the charts that are presented. We're talking here about achievement data on a single point in time, but it is our fall actionable data. So you'll see each of the grades that were tested, and what happens is each of those little the colors on each of those bars represents students' performance and the level of performance. And so when we were talking earlier this evening about multi-tiered systems of support, we're talking about looking at our students in those orange and red bars and what they might need from us in terms of instruction. I'm not going to run through all of the things. One of the things I wanted to point out is the Acadians reading data. You'll see that our first graders, 27% of them rated in the proficient category. When I talked to the reading specialist about that, I said, you know, I looked at the Acadians data and I noticed that first grade is a little low compared to the other grades. And she said, Melissa, we tested them too early. We should have waited a little bit for them to get settled into a routine in school,
Right, okay.
to get ready to receive an assessment, to
Makes
know
sense.
what was going to happen.
That's an anomaly.
And when they went back and did, so this is level 1, right? And when they get that, you know, they don't fit in that 27 category, they are flagged. And then that flag means we go to another level of assessment. So many students in the first grade received that second level of assessment. And when they went through that second level of assessment, they were green light. They received the green light. So she was happy to report that's where she thinks much of that came from. Happy to answer questions about this or allow you some time to peruse and think about it and come back at our next meeting.
Is there any thought in future years to moving that date, pushing it farther out so that we do account for that?
So I think one of the challenges is making sure we can get everybody in a reasonable time to make it actionable early enough in
Right.
the year. Someone's going to go first, but perhaps it's not first grade next year. Something for them to consider when they're planning.
Good,
I'm sure they're going to take that into account.
good. Thank you, Melissa.
You're welcome.
Questions from the board, Tim?
Yeah, is there a sense of year over year trending? Like, I don't know if it's here or not.
Yeah,
Didn't
year
really-
over year trending isn't here. What we can do is look at growth over time. I didn't include that here. I'll include that in later iterations of the data. This is simply our baseline. This is where our students are entering their current level of performance, right? What we are going to act upon for this school year. So I left off the year
Okay.
over year because we would be comparing in some respects apples to oranges. Right? If we're looking at first grade data to first grade data, we'll be able to tell some things, but again, it's one point in time. So we need a number, I think, you know, I would appreciate more than just one snapshot of when we're looking at first grade's performance, because now we're talking about instructional materials and teachers' instructional status, right? One test isn't going to give me a big clue about whether that's working or not, but multiple data points will.
Correct, and that's what. So I was imagining the journey of the student from kindergarten through graduation. It might be kind of interesting to see that type of approach.
Yep, and we certainly can.
To see if it's
get into some of that.
consistent, you know, if achievement is consistent, and if there's any variables to look at.
Yeah, you know, and that's a good point. When I looked at first grade, it stuck out so much because last year we exited our kindergartners at 77% proficient. And now they're entering at 27% proficient. And I went, whoa, red flag. What's happening?
Exactly.
Right? That was eye-opening. And so I had to probe a little bit.
Yeah, and
about that.
that's why, exactly. And I do hear from a lot of the community members that we want to see kind of the more analytical trending when it's appropriate. So
One thing too that we've talked about, Tim, that I think is good to spread out to the community is we will let the next deliberative session for those tests where the people who don't take the tests as zeros are factoring, we will disaggregate those numbers so that people don't see a final number, but oh, by the way, includes 15 zeros. So we will show all of those. Okay. And I think that'd be a lot clearer to the community, but only on those tests where the zeros count. Schools, yeah, no, the Department of Education found out that there were certain schools and or districts who were exempting their lowest achieving students from taking the tests. And so what they did was they put in an administrative rule essentially that said, if you don't take the test, it counts as a zero and it counts towards the final average in the factory.
Well, what Steve is saying is 100% accurate, but we can't disaggregate that data.
Well, we can on a slide. We'll put it this way, we'll try to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because
that sends such a different message, right?
Well, we're
It's
all,
like,
because we're comparing, truthfully, that's comparing apples to not even another fruit. It's comparing
Right.
apples to cars.
right.
Because if that is going to give us a different view comparative to other districts. Again,
Yeah.
I think we have to highlight, in my opinion, that this is one piece of data.
Yeah.
It is one piece of data. It is not the be all end all of where we're at. It's one piece of data, just like, you know, when Melissa's talking about NEWA, or we're talking about, you know, or report card, or it's all, these are all one instances.
Yeah.
Right. And statistics are malleable in a lot of ways. The
Yeah.
presentation and the deliberative session has been on my mind too.
Mm.
How do we make sure that we make it
Sure.
more transparent, accessible, fact checking?
And we got
whatever it
comments
takes.
like that where people
Yeah.
did not know that the zeros were counted in the final
Understood.
analysis. Helen?
Liz, or maybe Steve knows this, is there any statewide data that shows the percentage of students per district that do not test so that we
We
could
have
do at
that.
least a comparison?
We have
Because
it.
I do think we have
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah,
an
we-
unusually high number of students that don't test.
So I just want to do a little bit of clarification around the zeros and when we are held accountable to the zeros. So the state of New Hampshire requires 95% participation. We meet that threshold at Highbridge Hill. We are not docked any points at Highbridge
Okay.
Hill for participation. That doesn't
That
happen.
Low,
there.
you know,
Um,
elementary.
Right, Boynton Middle School, we are meeting that 95% threshold as well. We are not docked any points with the zeros there for non-participation. At the high school level, we do have a number of opt-outs. We have fallen below that 95% threshold. And so essentially, if we had 90% participation, 5% of our students' zeros would count because that's the percentage below the 95. So that's how that works. When we pull those zeros out, we can inadvertently give folks a false sense of security. We are held accountable by determination, regardless of with those zeros accounted for. So for example, our designation in CSI, right? While that didn't have anything to do with participation, if it had, and we had disaggregated that and then said, well, here's where our proficiency levels are. Boy, and then we're smacked with a CSI designation. We have now said two different things, right? Our students are X proficient, but the state is saying we are not meeting the threshold. And that's a worry I have by pulling those zeros out of that data. I don't want to give a false sense of where we
Security.
are.
And I appreciate the
For
range
accountability.
because I think it's really has to be done thoughtfully and carefully.
Right.
Right. In
And I
consideration
think
of a lot of
my
different.
point really is that I think we have to address that issue. There are people that weren't aware at all that there was a threshold above or below or
Yeah.
what the impact was. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to work towards what I heard back, which, okay, transparency, and I don't understand how you came to those numbers and whatever. So
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
anything else from? Huh? All right, Liz, I believe it's the auto renovation update.
Yep, Steve, before that, I did just want to come back around to the budget.
Okay.
Any feedback that you have for us, because we have to go back and start putting together a draft too. Now we have to scrub some numbers anyway. We'll have the healthcare numbers, we'll have some information, but any feedback that you can have, because principals are going to be waiting for us, directors are going to be waiting for us to say, what do we do? Where are we here? Do you have any direction or any guidance as far as what you would like to see? Or are you thrilled with the fabulous presentation that we put together tonight?
Thrilled. However,
There we go.
what is the constructive type of feedback? Because I got like John proposed a theory for a different presentation. I could go there. I could talk a little bit about the unfunded mandate discussion. And I think that there's power for that, but be able to kind of pull that unfunded mandate out, like, you know, the state, or we're having an external force telling us we have to do this, but there's no money attached. And being able to have that as part of the conversation to inform.
So you're
decision-making.
talking specifically about the presentation, right?
Potentially.
Okay.
Potentially, but, or even a way
I'm
to.
talking about
flag.
draft 2.
Right, but even in flagging like this, like a asterisk or something, that's an unfunded.
Oh, like flagging in the budget, something
Kind
that's
of.
unfunded.
Something like that, something, yeah.
Okay.
I don't think we've ever done that, Rachel. What do you think?
That would be really hard to box out.
It could
Yeah,
be,
yeah,
and it might,
could
and I
be.
didn't want to do it in a big audience
That's
and
my
make a.
concern.
Well, if we use Kristen's numbers, right, she gave us maybe 1.5% is funded, right? She gave 900 some odd $1,000, 900 some odd
Right.
million, and 100 some odd million are,
Mhm.
so we're talking about maybe 2% that is funded. And it's portions of funding, right? So when we talk about student, we talk about, you know, cost per pupil. The state is going to give us $4,100 per pupil. The cost per pupil, the last time we ran through, was about $18,000. So it would be hard, you know, where would we asterisk? Would it be the pencil
I don't
line or
know,
the-
I just,
right?
Yeah.
It's just,
it's
it would be hard
feedback,
to-
if it's useful to you, take it.
Yeah.
You know,
no.
take it if not.
I think you've hit the nail on the head though. I really think a lot of this, we need to do some serious thinking on the deliberative session on how we present this information.
Exactly.
Because,
Right.
you know, if it becomes almost very difficult, as Rachel said, to parse it out of an entire budget line. But I think if we can put together some slides that say, let's understand this. These things are happening to us every year, these unfunded mandates, and costs are rising. And we need some slide in there that says, look, this isn't discretionary spending.
I've been working on an infograph
Mhm.
for what it looks like, and I was kind of using it with last year's numbers for like percentages of what it was. And I think it's really important to also discuss the discretionary versus mandatory,
Yes.
you know, because a lot of this, we don't have any, like, we
We have
have
very
the
little
staff that we have,
discretionary.
we have their salaries,
Mm-hmm.
we have their benefits, which is 74% of the budget. We're really talking, I think last year's budget, it was 6% of the budget was actually discretionary. Very, very small
Right.
percentage.
Our wiggle room is disappearing.
Yeah.
Well, and yeah, I get that, but I think it's also part of the communication. too, so.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You know, I'm sitting here thinking, you know, what kind of feedback could I give, you know, and, you know, taking into account what Tim was suggesting, which was, you know, you need to focus on the deliberative session for sure. I think I have to rely on the expertise that's in the room and knowing that everybody was looking at it very conservatively. The ABC may come up with some recommendations, but I think they're going to be relatively minor because there isn't, you know,
No.
there isn't
No.
a lot of discretionary spending. And so, you know, I will scrub the budget, see if I can come up with anything that, you know, would be helpful. But I think I agree with what Steve said as well, is that we have to spend some quality time, I think, as a group, strategizing for the deliberative session in terms of what will be in, what should be covered in the presentation educationally, so that as people are hearing things, for instance, like, you know, the testing proficiency scores and what do they really mean? You know, charter school funding versus, you know, district funding, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, the special education costs, you know, that we bear for people who don't even go to an in-district school. I think people need to hear that, but I think we also need to reach out between now and February, whenever the deliberative session is, to people who do get it or would understand it as we're giving explanations, and really need to encourage them to attend the deliberative session.
Agreed. I mean, I did put out messaging for tonight,
Yeah,
you know,
because I believe, and I know that this is being televised or recorded, but anyway, I believe that there were people that did attend the deliberative session who also understood it as well as we do, and that didn't matter. You know, they understood the challenges and so forth, but ignored some of those facts.
yeah. So our job in the next 2 weeks, again, we'll be, Rachel and I and Melissa will be responding to the feedback in that, the document that the ABC has, but we're also going to be looking at numbers and not, like, for example, one of the numbers that we talked about was the curriculum line for Stacy at the high school is going to be going down, I think, almost $11,000 because we were able to purchase some stuff through some grant funds. So like that will be reflected in this budget. The co-curricular committee will hopefully be coming at some point in the next month forward with a recommendation, which will also have a fiscal impact on the budget. But if there's, again, like, for example, I'm just going to throw this out there, I'm picking on the high school right now, library tables. If that's something that you're like, no, library tables are good, you know, like, then
It was hard to swallow that. And I didn't really understand what flexible seating is. I mean, if it's like leather, I mean, my impression, just blunt, it was like leather chairs versus hard chairs.
no
It
flex.
was-
So yeah, sure.
And I don't want to get into it,
Yeah.
but those, like, you bring it up, and I'm trying to search my memory now to find other ones like that.
So
and-
that's kind of what we're looking for.
Yeah,
If
and I
there's
think
like,
that's what you're asking is kind of like
Yeah.
maybe a little bit of like first impression, reaction kind of
Sure.
stuff. Okay.
Yeah, the library tables kind of got me a little bit too, I have to say. It sounds great. You know, it sounds like this is a great idea to change the space, but is it really needed at this point in time?
And we, having sat in on all of the budget, I mean, these are things we said, look, if that's been an issue for years, put it in there. That's what a draft is for.
Right.
And then we can,
Rachel, maybe you gave us this number already. Do we have a budget percent increase based upon this draft, or we're not? What is the increase?
5%.
5%?
4.9, right?
Yeah.
5%.
I mean, at this point, I'd say that's pretty impressive when we look at inflation being probably.
yeah.
much
And
higher
health
than that.
insurance, 19%.
Right, so I
yeah.
do, send the message that I do appreciate it. It looks like everyone's trying to be really
I
fiscally
agree.
conservative.
Oh,
But there were a few things.
Yeah, that
I
was
say,
one of them.
Yeah, it would be nice, but is it needed right now?
The different cringe, maybe that's what the kids say, was I really wanted to learn more about the money that goes out to charter schools for special education. And I didn't really fully understand the difference. Like, it sounded like we have a small percentage here to administrate, but most of the funds goes out, like $9,000 and $1,800.
Yeah, so it's state adequacy aid.
Okay.
Public schools receive about $4,200 per student.
Yeah.
Charter schools receive about $9,100 per student
Okay,
from the,
so we were
from the
close.
state.
Okay, got it. Got
If
it.
we have a special ed student on top of the adequacy aid, we get $1,900 roughly.
So if that student is going to
A charter,
a charter,
Yeah.
the charter school gets the 9,091. We get the 1,800,
Yeah.
but then we have to provide services.
Services.
And I think what Kristen's point was that if we have to provide a para support to a student over at a charter
Yeah.
school,
We have
it's
to-
a lot more than $1,800.
Okay, which I got that, but the delivery of it was maybe it was a learning experience for me. So I
Okay.
think it might take a little bit more. And I'm also looking here, kind of quick study. There's no line item for that, is there? Like, how many are we budgeting for the revenue of? This isn't revenue. This is only expense.
This is only expenses.
Expense.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's another point that like we have discussed is that this budget doesn't reflect like a lot of the CTE costs, like the transportation costs, where the grant that we got $208,000 grant is going to cover those costs, but that's not reflected here because this is simply our expenses. It doesn't include any revenue.
That's really helpful because that has kind of been a mystery for me. It's
Yep.
like a lot of this, like being on the school board, I see that grants are covering a lot of things. Is there any way to indicate the revenue source in these line items?
So typically what we do, and we
Not an
have had it
asterisk, but something.
at the, I mean, you, so like almost include offset with
Right.
potential
Yeah,
revenue.
just like an indicator, like this is a, this is a grant offset. There's a grant offset against this
Yeah,
number.
it can't always be guaranteed that we're going to
Eligible
receive-
for something
yes.
like that.
So probably that first meeting in December, I'll have a revenue estimate because once the state publishes their adequacy estimates, usually it's mid-November.
Mhm.
I'll come to the board with a revenue estimate.
Yeah.
And that gives you kind of an idea of.
I think he's asking for
But
a
I'm-
line.
Differentiating the grant, like that grant example, is it possible to say that offset by grant somewhere in this description?
Yeah, we do for the CTE.
You do.
Yep, that's in the notes.
I must have missed it. Okay.
There's a lot to digest here. Like,
There
there's a
there
lot.
really is.
Okay.
And I think that's
that-
one of the more difficult things to get out to the public is the services and the cost of what we supply to the charter schools, the aid they get versus what we get. I mean, that just is ill understood. One of the things I'm going to propose, and I haven't even talked to Liz about this, but I would like to, after the turn of the year, I would like to set aside a special meeting that we actually do a work session on the deliberative presentation.
Fine with
I
me.
mean, it's, the burden has fallen a lot on administration and or comments for people at the board. I would like to have a work session where we sit down and say, all right, what are the priorities that we have to get across? How do we do that best? Graphically, whatever. So I will be proposing that.
And that would be good for us to talk among the community. What don't you understand? What do you feel like? you
Right.
need more information on?
And it will be a public meeting. So our discussion and how we get out the information, we can reinforce those things that the committee wants to hear.
Perfect.
Now that I've told you.
Did,
Well, thank you.
did
I
that
think
help?
it's, I
Liz?
think it's a good idea.
Did that feedback help? I kind of was just spewing a couple.
Yeah, and
ideas.
I
Okay.
think that's what we're looking for because the next 2 weeks is really like critical, right? We'll be receiving
Right.
feedback. I think the ABC formally formally presents to us at the next meeting with their recommendations on draft 1, but we've already have draft 2 at that point, right? So, if there's any feedback that the board has and anything that we can do between now and then, I think what I'm hearing, I'm trying to use safe language. What I'm hearing is that I'm going to ask building principals to just take a look, budget managers to take a look, anything that is not 100% necessary.
Right.
So I'll give a perfect example of the library tables, right? That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's great. And I think what you're really asking the principals is to identify those items that are red flag items that would be nice to have, but difficult to support or defend.
Yep. And again, I think that when you look at where the majority of our increase is coming from, it's from positions. It's not from the $6,000
No.
library table.
No.
It's from the $100,000, the two positions for special ed that are being brought from the IDEA grant into the general fund. It's those positions, which if we wanted to talk positions, I feel very strongly about almost all those positions.
Okay.
Oh, I'm just
So again, front load any thoughts or
Feedback.
comments you have, front load it as quickly as you can to Liz. I think that was
Understood.
great help.
Yeah, and if you could have the budget managers, maybe look at what their percent increases are. Some of them are significantly higher than others. And certainly with tech, I understand the Chromebook. I mean, that really jumped up and she looked like she had a tight budget, the Chromebooks, but there was no way around that. You have to.
Exactly.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
So I understand that. It's not completely, bring
They're
down your
aging out
percent,
and,
but just kind of look and see. Can you bring that percent
Yeah.
increase down a bit?
Capital reserve was really good. I thought about it later. I should have said to Michelle that 10,000 is probably low.
It is.
But it's
We
a
did
starting
talk about
point.
that, yeah.
It's a starting point.
Mhm.
Because if
Yeah.
there is a cybercrime here and somehow everything's
Oh, man. Don't even
encrypted
go
and you
there.
can't, you have to pay a ransom.
Right.
It's just like crazy.
I don't even want to think about
Yeah,
that.
I know you don't, but
It is,
Yeah.
listening to these superintendents talk about it, it was,
generally though, the security from a usage perspective, like I can't play Fortnite, my kid can't play stuff, that kind of stuff is attention and detail that supports education. I think we're doing better than some.
good.
So,
Good.
but still at 10,000 is a little light.
It is.
But maybe we could talk about a way to start with 10,000. Let's go to 10,000. Maybe we'll target 40 or 50,000 over
Mhm.
5 years.
I think that was the
But
kind of
we
the
have,
plan.
we definitely.
The
have to
idea
open
is
the
the
door.
10,000 was like a placeholder, a seed money to get that
To get it
capital
started.
reserve started.
All right.
Yeah.
And I would communicate it just like that. Just like this is an entry into a capital
Yep.
reserve that we need.
Sure.
Okay, do you want to go on to the auto renovations update?
Yes, last time, last board meeting, we had discussed the auto renovations and the informally, it was a no. I'm looking for a formal motion at this point. I would like to formally let, our CTE center know, we will withdraw our application. That's what I'm looking for.
So I'd like to make a motion to formally withdraw our application for the CT expansion for the auto program.
Tim makes the motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Ellen seconds the motion. Is there any further discussion, folks? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? It passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Under policies, we're under first read.
Mhm.
And first read on those, as you know, it's not an action. First read is just that, a first read to bring the policies to your attention. Between the first read and the second read, if there are issues that come up or you look at it, you find something, whatever, we'll front load and we'll look at that at second reading.
Could I make a comment? Is there space for just a quick, simple question on
Sure.
the policies?
Sure.
Okay. So I paid attention in JIC 3 and JIC 4,
Oh, yes.
the offender letter and the victim letter.
Yep.
My only question would be, is that going to also, as the policy process goes through the policies that we did last meeting, which is like, there's a bullying policy, but then there's a harassment policy. Is there going to also be some type of communication that's similar to that there was harassment,
That's a good
a
question.
harassment victim letter and a harassment offender letter?
Yes, so we are required under, so you're talking about ACAC, I think is our sexual harassment policy. That's
I can't
one of the
ever
ones that were
remember,
brought
but
up
yeah,
last time.
I'll take your word
Yes,
for it.
and so in that law, there's this similar requirement for notice. There are, I think, more phases of notice for that law. So
Okay.
we already have, we have letters. They're not part of the policy, but we do have standard form letters that our administrators will use if they're involved.
Can
in
we
those.
have them ready?
They are ready.
Okay.
Mhm.
And then are these part of the policy or are these just examples for it, like our benefit to learn?
So these are current policies.
They are.
So
Okay.
how it kind of worked is, again, there was feedback that we wanted to take a look at these. They hadn't been looked at since I think 2009. So we brought them forward to the lawyers, had some discussions. They poked a little bit at our process. One of their recommendations was to remove JICAA because the difference because we've now teased out Title IX into its own policy. So their recommendation was to pull that, to keep JIC, and then we updated the letters and the safe school zone. Again, I'm sorry, I don't actually have the answer of whether we legally need to have them as a policy. I just know that they were a policy, and so we're just looking to.
Kind of more of a conversational piece. Because I, like even the notice today that we received, it's like, it's growing out there.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Well, the goal line keeps moving. A
Well-
little more information or a little less information,
Yeah. So this was a threat that wasn't a
Oh,
threat.
yes, yep.
I'm sorry, I was too vague. Yeah, I apologize for that. But it seems like we're getting a lot of feedback from the district plus just the world in general that this stuff is proliferating. I want to make sure we're ready.
And we are going to have to implement a total policy review more frequently. I mean, what we've done as this has come down, I mean, there's just so many hours in a day, right? As we look at new policies that come down and revisions that are required. But I think we would try to do a more regular review of our policies in general.
And Jocelyn's actually been working on that. The next policy meeting, she's going to have it. We have a document that shows like when our policy was last updated versus when
Yes.
NHSBA updated it.
And that just has to happen.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they're coming down so fast and furious. And the problem is that when NHSBA comes out with them, there's recommended, there's optional, and then there's mandatory by law. So, you know, we have to play a little bit of a game with the recommended and the optional as to whether it applies to our district. Stuff by law, of course, we don't have any option. Okay, personnel report, Dr. Bogozowski.
So you have the personnel report in front of you. I did want to go into non-public about the personnel report. I had a couple notes on there.
Is there anything you want to say before we go into non-public about?
I don't know if we want to approve the slate or you want to wait till after.
Why don't we wait until after non-public and we'll approve the slate either as amended or as stands.
Okay.
I'll need a motion and we'll need a roll call to go into non-public session.
I'll make a motion to go into non-public.
Midge makes the motion to go into non-public. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Tim seconds. Roll call. Tim?
Yes.
Ellen?
Yes.
Mitch? Steve, yes. What is the correct time? It's
8:45.
8:45. Let's reconvene in about 5 minutes. You know, it's already pretty late. Just give people a time to stretch.